Well, welcome back, folks. Today we're going to begin the conversation around restoring the exhaust system for the Suzuki TS50 Gaucho project, and obviously that's what you see here in the shot. I've already pulled the diffuser or baffle out, like you can see here, and the cap that fits on the end of the pipe, obviously that goes on last. This goes in first, and then this cap fits over the end. Just a little screw that holds it in place. These two screws right here attach the chrome heat shield or guard that fits over this section of the unit. And of course over here we have, right here, we have the collar that threads up onto the cylinder. One thing that's a little surprising about this exhaust system being an underslung style, and that is it wraps up underneath the engine and the frame of the motorcycle. Typically these don't survive very well. You know, Suzuki uses this style on quite a number of their bikes. Obviously the TS50, I think the TS125, TC125, Honda SL100, SL125, etc. And invariably these end up being damaged, dented. The bike gets dropped, it falls over, they hit things, and end up with pretty serious damage and or corrosion. This one has survived very much intact. In fact, I've gone over it in some detail and I can't find any damage on this unit at all in terms of physical damage, such as dents, creases, that kind of thing. It's dirty, it's a little rusty, certainly it needs to be cleaned. You can see here there's a lot of buildup of oil, that again very common on a two-stroke. Come back to that in a minute. The reason I'm starting on the exhaust system at this point is we're now heading into the autumn or the fall season here. We're just starting to experience some cooler weather. It hasn't really kicked over to a full-blown autumn, but we're not too far from it. So what I need to do is I want to get this painted and restored and painted. Well, I still have the opportunity to paint outside because something this large, obviously I will have to paint outside, and I need good weather to do that. And I have probably a few weeks to a month at this point, tops, to get this done. I want to get it done before the weather changes, even though it won't be installed probably for some time yet. Maybe later this winter I'll get this installed on a bike, but I want to get it done now, and I'll just set it aside, and then when I get to it later this winter, it'll be ready to go. So that's really why I'm moving to the exhaust system at this point. Since it's in such good shape, what I'm thinking I'm going to do, and I haven't really settled on my plan exactly yet, so I'm talking it through with you a little bit. Often what I do is I take exhaust systems like this, I take them down to the commercial blaster, media blaster that I can rent time on their equipment. It's 25 miles away, 30 miles away, something like that. And in 15 minutes, I could have this blasted back to bare metal. I almost always do that when I've got to do serious repairs, like repair dents and dings and damage, serious damage. Since this one doesn't have that condition, what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to clean it and not media blast it, but I will sand it really well. In other words, I'll go over the whole thing, and there's more corrosion and rust here at the head pipe, which is the header, which is again very, very common. The rest of the exhaust still retains most of its original factory paint. There is some evidence of surface rust, of course, especially on the backside, and it is dirty. It needs to be cleaned. But I'm thinking I will manually sand it to prepare it for paint rather than blast it back to bare metal. That's my thinking right now. I haven't completely processed through that, but that's the direction I'm leaning right now. A little bit of it's going to depend on what happens to the finish, the factory finish here, when I clean the inside of the pipe. Now this piece, this diffuser, and this end cap, what I'm probably going to do, or I'm thinking I'm going to do, I'm just going to put them in the gas grill, that we have up on the deck near the house. Crank that sucker all the way up to 600 degrees and let them cook. These parts cook off, and the heat, basically you'll bake it off and get this contamination off. I can do the same thing with, you know, a torch, like a MAP gas or propane torch, certainly, but I might just put them in the gas grill, let them run for a while, and not tell my wife, and clean the grill when I'm done, so we can still use it obviously later on for grilling out. The exhaust system itself, what I will probably do is I will take it, I will suspend it outside, of course, some way so it's hanging vertical. Then I will take a torch and heat through each end, that being the output side here, as well as the input up there where it attaches to the cylinder head, and just you know, cook the inside out with that. Probably I'll start with propane because it's not quite as hot as MAP. It'll smoke like the devil and burn that residual oil out. Obviously, I need to degrease it, get the oil off of it before I can paint it. And I'm going to do that before I sand it so it can cool. And then I would then proceed at that point with determining whether to sand it or end up going back down to the media blast place and just doing it that way. So I'm just sharing with you some of my thinking. I haven't fleshed it all out yet. This right here, I think, is supposed to be a drain, by the way. Looks like it's pinched off. I'm going to have to look into that. I think that's a drain, but I couldn't swear to it. I'm for moisture to drain out of the system. That's what it looks like anyway. So I could go either way. Once I've degreased it, if that takes off, which is very possible, it will do, the heat from that process might take off what's left of the factory paint. If that's the case and there's very little of the original factory paint left, again, very, very possible. In fact, it might even be probable. Then I'll probably just strip it down to bare metal and start from scratch. But I'm not there yet. First I got to degrease it. The paint, let's talk about paint. I have to confess I've struggled with appropriate paints over the years. I've painted many exhaust systems, some of which, quite a few of which you've seen on my channel. I've tried all different kinds of paints. I'm not wild about the kind of paint that you've got to bake, to cure, which many of them now you have to do, because you have to run, well, you have to either have an oven large enough to bake it in, and I don't, or you have to cycle the engine on the unit. Very specific process. You heat it up, cool it down, heat it up, cool it down, like 3 times to cure and bake out the finish. I don't typically run my restoration projects that long. That's really an effective way to cure the paint for me. And again, I've tried pretty much every brand out there over the years, and I've got them all to work, but I haven't decided yet, and long story short, I haven't really decided yet what paint I'm going to use for this project, and I'm going to do a little more research. I'm always in a quandary when it comes to painting these exhaust systems, to get a good quality paint that matches the OEM paint that was used. Marbles Motors does offer a non-bake black matte finish paint that they claim matches on the Honda. I'm sure that would match this as it was original very well. That's what I used on the SL125, and that turned out okay. It's expensive, but it worked. I don't think I have enough to paint this system right now. I'd have to get another can of it. But anyway, I don't want to ramble on much longer. Again, this video is going to be shot over a period of time. In fact, it might even be over a period of weeks by the time this is all done. So I'll be shooting it in segments, so be prepared for that. And then when it's all done, I'll put it together as one video out on the other end there somewhere. Again, it could be weeks, maybe a month or more away before it's all done. We'll have to see. I'm not going to show baking of this diffuser and some of those parts. I may show a shot of me cleaning with heat or torch this muffler system. I don't know. We'll see when we get there. It's actually several weeks later. I've been working on a number of different things around the house besides the exhaust system here for the little Suzuki, but you can see it's in the shot right now. I've got it about ready to go for paint. A few days ago, I took it down and rented time on that commercial Media Blast company's equipment. They rent time on their equipment for $18 an hour. It took me about 20 minutes, and they charged me $6 US for the time to blast this, and it came out really, really well. I've got it just about ready to go. I've got plugs, rubber plugs in the ends, as you can see here. These mounts are for the little chrome heat shield, and these are the original screws, by the way. I just put them in to avoid spraying paint into the threads. And then over on this side, you can see here at the top of your shot, I've got the, let me get that in a little bit better position for you so you can see it a little bit better. Right here, I threaded in a bolt. That's a drain. That's the bottom of the exhaust right here. And that's a drain right here. And there's just a plug that goes in there. In fact, here's the plug right there. That's the original plug that I've got it set up and prepared for paint. Just threaded a spare bolt in there and then took a piece of wire, stiff. This is very stiff wire, and this is what I'm going to use to hang it when I paint the exhaust system here shortly. Last thing I need to do is do a last or final degrease. I'll spray it down. I'll hang it and spray it down with brake cleaner and let it dry for a little while. But it's about ready to go. The baffle here, I just took it to the wire wheel and cleaned it off here. This is all carbon, as you can see right here. I just cleaned that off a little bit just to see what the steel underneath does look like, and it's virtually pristine. I will eventually clean this whole thing on the wire wheel before it gets reinstalled internal to the exhaust system. We already talked about this plug right here. Again, that'll have to be sprayed with brake cleaner, allow it to dry, flash off. I'll just hold this in my hand when I spray this bolt, that little plug. Next thing I would like to talk about is the paint that I'm going to use, which is something new for me that I've never tried before. So let me get the paint in here and we'll discuss that in a little more detail. The paint I'm going to use, this is Cerakote. I have never sprayed this before. Cerakote Type C, or what they call Series C. Cerakote makes both a heat-dried paint. This is paint. This is not powder coating. This is liquid. Heat-dried, in other words, you bake it in an oven, or an air-dry. This is air-dried because I don't have an oven big enough to put this unit in. And this is, as I understand, Cerakote was originally developed for the firearms industry, and this paint, this particular paint, is rated to around 1600 degrees Fahrenheit, and it has excellent reviews online for all kinds of applications besides firearms. Again, I've never sprayed it out before. You've got to shake it very thoroughly. It does not come in aerosol form, so you've got to have a means of spraying it, and they recommend HVLP, which is what I'm going to use right here. This is an inexpensive HVLP detail gun. I have actually several different sizes of these inexpensive guns. I've never used this particular one before because I've never needed to, but it should be just about right for this volume of paint. This is, I think, 4 US ounces, and I think this cup is supposed to hold like 4 US ounces, so it's pretty close. My math tells me that this should be just about the right amount of paint to cover that exhaust system. You use one coat, you spray it one time, so I will use up virtually all of this paint, at least I'm expecting to, when I get to spraying it. Again, one coat, one time. You don't come back and do multiple coats. It dries to the touch pretty quickly. I think within 2 hours it'll dry to the touch, and then it takes 5 days for a full cure out before you could install it on your project. It'll be far more than 5 days for me. It'll be probably several months at least before I get to installing that exhaust system back on the bike. There is no thinner involved. You do not reduce this. You do not thin it. It comes right out of the bottle. Again, you have to shake it very thoroughly. In fact, the instructions indicate for like 5 minutes, which is forever to stand there and shake something. It has to be screened through a fine mesh, which you would typically use anyway for an HVLP, sprayed at 30 psi or so, and once you shake it, you screen it, put it in a cup, hook up your air, do a test shot to make sure you've got the right pattern, and then just go to it. That's what I'm intending to do here shortly. First, again, I'm going to hang this exhaust system up in the position it's going to be painted in. I'm going to hose it down good one last time with brake cleaner, let it flash off for a little while, and then we will get to painting. Now, I'm not going to show all those details. I'm not going to show me spraying it down with the brake cleaner. That's pretty academic. Most of you know what that is. I will probably set up the camera and let you see some of me spraying it out with the gun, the detail gun, and the paint. But I'm just going to be doing a fogging back and forth, and I will try to give you a flavor of that. Then we'll pick up the video after that when it's all done and curing out. And then at that point, this exhaust system will be ready to go on the bike. There's one other part that I failed to mention. Let me get it over here for you. Right here, and that is the tip. That's what this is right here. It's just soaking right now in evaporust. This piece goes on the very end over there of the exhaust exit from the system. I'm just soaking again in evaporust one last time. I'm going to take it over to the blast cabinet here in a few minutes also and blast it. And this will be painted also at the same time as everything else. About 24 hours later now, and you can see the finished exhaust system. It's dry to the touch. According to the manufacturer's instructions, after 24 hours you can actually even ship the part. It's dry, but it's not cured. It doesn't reach its full cure and hardness till after 5 days under normal conditions. But you certainly can handle it now. I'm going to avoid any excess handling though with the part. When I'm done here with this video clip, I'm going to hang it back up in my garage, my shop, and just let it sit for the minimum of the 5 days, probably a week or so before I wrap it up and store it away. This pipe won't be installed for a while yet. You can see the two rubber bungs or plugs that I pulled out of each end of the exhaust itself. This is the bolt I used to thread into the fitting there, the drain fitting that I suspended it from, as you saw, you probably saw in the previous shot when I showed little clips of me spraying this out. The paint itself is very thin, it's very watery-like, it's sprayed out very well, laid down nice and smooth. Again, to reiterate, it's a one-coat system. You don't lay down multiple coats of paint after 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes. One shot, you spray it out and you let it dry off. It tacks off in 30 minutes to 2 hours. Dry to the touch in 24 hours, cures out in 5 days. I used about 2/3 of this paint. There's still a fair amount left, probably that much in there, I would say, is left. And you can see I date my paint. You can see September. This is late September of 2022. And then I cleaned the top of the container really well, resealed it tight, and then rewrapped it with the tape that they had wrapped it with when they shipped it to me. So I do have a little paint left over. As I understand it, the shelf life of this paint is approximately 1 year or so. So I have a little bit left over if I need it for touch-up. One thing I would like to talk about a little bit is the spray gun itself. I touched on this very briefly. I use this detailed spray gun. This, by the way, if you're wondering where I got it, it's just a Harbor Freight inexpensive detailed spray gun. I think they go now for around $12 US or so, something like 12, 14 US dollars. They're not expensive at all. I did have to add the fitting here for the air connection. This worked really well. This handled the paint perfectly. The tip size is 0.6 millimeter, which is quite small. I don't know if you can see that stamped right in there. They recommend, the Cerakote company recommends a 0.8 millimeter, which is obviously a little bit larger tip. I could have drilled this out to 0.8, but I didn't want to. I thought I'd try it with a 0.6, and the 0.6 worked fine. Again, the bigger the hole in the spray tip, the more paint you're going to lay down. And they're very clear in their instructions. They don't want you laying down paint because it is so thin. Again, it's very water-like. It's so thin that it will run. They caution about getting too heavy-handed with the paint. They want it laid down nice and thin. Otherwise, you will introduce runs, and then, of course, you've got a whole other problem. I have no runs in this part that I can find at all. And I took my time using a small tip, small little detail gun, and it worked perfectly. I'm very pleased with the way this tool worked out. The other two parts, that is the tip right here. This goes on the end of the exhaust system right here. I sprayed, as you can see, I just wedged it onto this little piece of wood, lumber here, and then just, sprayed it out and let that set aside overnight to dry. And then the drain bolt right here. This probably wasn't painted originally. It was a little bit rusty, surface rust and road dirt and grime and oil. And so I couldn't really tell very well if it was originally painted. It probably wasn't, but I painted it anyway. Again, I just wedged it in this piece of corrugated, sprayed it out, and just set it aside, let it dry overnight. So I'm really happy with the Cerakote in terms of the application. It wasn't much more difficult than using an aerosol spray. It sprayed out much thinner than your typical aerosols. And again, this is supposed to be good up to 1600 degrees Fahrenheit and is considered a top quality paint, even for high heat applications like this exhaust system. So that's going to be it for this video on reconditioning the exhaust system for the Suzuki TS50 Gaucho. Again, I'm going to just set this aside, let it cure out here for the next week. Then I will carefully wrap it in some soft, clean, probably towels similar to this one, and just set it aside in a safe place because it will not be installed back on the project probably for a number of months anyway, but it will be all ready to go at that point. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.